Okay, welcome everyone to our seventh Crafting Support Project Family Webinar Series. I'm Dr. Julie McCarthy, one of the clinical psychologists and researchers at McLean Hospital, and I'm so pleased to be with you all tonight to talk about our presentation on wrap skills for families to help loved ones in crisis. Okay, so first I'll talk about what the Crafting Support Project is, then I will turn it over to my wonderful co-host, Lisa McLaughlin Charland, who is a certified peer specialist with us at McLean, to speak about what wrap is. She is very knowledgeable in this area, and McLean is supported her in getting training in this area so that she can also teach others like us and people in her own courses on what wrap is. And then we'll have time for a Q&A as well at the end. So feel free to ask any questions, and then I'll have questions as well for Lisa too. Okay, so if you are newer to the Crafting Support Project, why we do what we do is typically, if you're with us, you may have someone in your personal life or in your work life where you felt like they needed help for some reason. And maybe that person in the moment at the time didn't necessarily feel like they needed that help themselves. And so that can be really tough when we have a loved one or someone that we care about who might not quite rise to the level of requiring help, for instance, like needing a inpatient hospitalization, and yet you may still be seeing them or living with them day to day and thinking that, gosh, something's got to change, something could be better. How can I help? And as family members, sometimes we may have a lot of great ideas about that. Other times we may feel like we don't know what to do. And sometimes in the absence of those skills, we might feel too nervous about rocking the boat or upsetting someone, so that we feel a little bit stuck and may find ourselves in the position where we may not say or do anything and feel like we have our hands tied. And so fortunately, there is an evidence-based approach called CRAFT, or Community Reinforcement and Family Training, that has been helpful to so many families, including my own, in terms of how to navigate conversations around treatment, but then also thinking about building resilience for ourselves and our loved ones. So we'll talk about how we can learn different skills, not to fix anyone else in our life or live their lives for them, but really think about how we can work with them to help them achieve their recovery goals. And so CRAFT is something that originally was designed to help loved ones enter treatment, or really to help family members or concerned significant others help someone else in their life to get the help that they need. And for those who were trained in CRAFT, about 7 out of 10 were able to get loved ones into treatment. And what people found was that family members not only were able to help their loved ones, but then also improved their depression and anxiety in terms of them decreasing, and having their happiness and their relationship happiness with their loved one increase. And since this was developed, it's been shared all around the globe, and yet still we're learning in the United States about CRAFT very often every day. And so if this is new to you, welcome. And if it's not, feel free to spread the word. And CRAFT is something that I've been trained in. We have a working relationship with the people who developed CRAFT, though Mass General Brigham as a whole and Harvard Medical School may not have that same working relationship. And so what we're talking about when we talk about CRAFT is topics very similar to what you may have encountered already in our webinar series, in terms of building motivation, thinking about self-care goal setting. Communication is the true cornerstone of CRAFT. And then we think about functional analysis, kind of putting ourselves in our loved one's shoes, for instance, understanding why they might do the things that they do or don't. And then we also talk about positive reinforcement, allowing for natural consequences to occur when safe to do so. And then also inviting a loved one into treatment if they're not in treatment already. IP stands for identified patient. And then problem solving, what's going on now and what could come down the road. And so one of the things that got me interested in this work, because my background is in psychosis, and thinking about understanding people's experience, but then also how to treat that as well, is the role of family members. Oftentimes as clinicians, if we're working with adult clients, we may not have permission to actually talk to families. And then families might be tasked with perhaps trying to figure out resources or ways to help a loved one, but they may not always have clear communication to do so from the treatment team. So ideally, research has shown that when family members are involved in a positive way, it can actually be associated with more positive outcomes. But due to privacy purposes, which is also, important to have, sometimes that can be too much of a good thing in terms of creating barriers between communication between family members and a loved one's treatment team. And so we thought about, research, and we're doing projects ongoing about how to help family members gain the skills to help support their loved ones, even if they may not have open lines of communication with the treatment team. And it can be even more effective if they do. And we realize that not everyone is eligible for the research, that we're doing. Say if they don't necessarily have that early psychosis stage of recovery right now, maybe they're a little bit further along, or maybe they don't have substance use on board. And so to increase the access to these types of skills, we created the Crafting Support Project. One, in the form of webinars that you're attending right now, and two, also in the form of one-on-one coaching. And this is made possible by a generous philanthropy gift to our Division of Psychotic Disorders. And so some of the topics that we've gone through so far are listed in gray, and then we are entering the tail end of our webinar series for this year with our WRAP presentation tonight, and then our next presentation as a family recovery night in November. Our one-on-one coaching, currently this is open to just McLean families who may not be eligible for a research study, or those who have, when we have availability, who, if they didn't get the intervention, we might also invite them to complete this as well. And so this is geared toward families who do have a loved one with psychosis anywhere along that spectrum. And so people can get up to 8 weeks of one-on-one sessions with a coach like myself or somebody else who's been trained in craft skills. And this is all on Zoom to make it convenient for folks. And this runs through the end of this year. And it looks like we might be able to extend this into the following year. And there is no cost to you. All right, so where is this going? Well, we've done some research. We're doing educational workshops and opportunities. And then thinking about whether or not something like this might be viable to extend through clinical services too. So for today, we're talking about how families might be helpful in potential crisis situations for their loved ones. So what is a crisis? One definition is it's a time of intense difficulty or trouble or danger. And so what this really points to is that it's temporary. Typically, it's not going to be something that lasts forever, even though it might feel like that in the moment. And it's certainly a challenge, and that challenge can look different for different people. Another definition that comes up is crisis in terms of a time when a difficult or important decision must be made. So sometimes we as family members may find ourselves at crossroads of, what do I do? What's the best course of action here? How can I help my loved one if we or they might have different opinions on what that might look like? And so I'm not going to be here to talk to you all about, what your crises look like or how to handle it. However, we are very lucky to have a WRAP presentation with Lisa McLaughlin Charland joining us today. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that I can let Lisa take things away. Okay. Oh, I think you're on mute, Lisa.
Thank you, Julie. What a great program this is. And I feel like it certainly could have helped my family. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Is that showing up okay for everybody?
Yeah, that looks great.
Perfect. So hi, everybody. I'm Lisa, and I'm a certified peer specialist here at McLean. Going to be talking today about WRAP skills for families to help loved ones in crisis. WRAP stands for the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. And I know, in healthcare, we have all these acronyms. So there's another one for you. So this is our agenda for today. And I really love this quote from Glenn Close. She's a family member to people who have dealt with mental health conditions, and she raises awareness and fights stigma in her advocacy. And I really agree that we need more unashamed conversation about these things. So I'm a certified peer specialist, and what that means is I have lived experience with a mental health condition, and I work for a few different programs for McLean Hospital. And what I do is I basically use my own experience to help others on their journey and support them and offer hope. So I work for a few different programs here, and I'm also a RAP group facilitator, and I'm a writer, a speaker, mental health advocate, family member, and friend. And I come to you tonight as both somebody with lived experience, with having experienced a crisis, and somebody who has family members who have experienced crises. My degree is in journalism, and spent most of my career in healthcare marketing, and so now I'm doing something really different, but I can, use some of those skills. I've written about my experience with mental health for about 4 years now, and I was also featured in a WBUR piece about mental health. And now creativity is part of my wellness, and I'm now working on a book about hope, humor, and recovery. So that's just a little bit about me. And I'm starting off with this quote from Nelson Mandela. It really resonates with me, as somebody in recovery, and as a person whose family members are in recovery. And just thinking about the resilience, and overcoming obstacles in our lives. I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how RAP has helped me. So my first experience with mental health issues, I was 13 years old. I was in middle school choir practice, and I began experiencing heart palpitations, and it was really confusing. I didn't know what was happening, and I was scared, and I felt like I was going to die. And I went to the nurse's office, and I went to the doctor to get an EKG done, and everything came back normal. And I didn't realize it then, but I had just had my first panic attack. And around the same time, my family member was struggling with substance misuse, and it led to some anxiety and depression on my part. Sometimes things at home felt, a little bit unpredictable. And I was also sad because I loved my family members and I wanted everybody to get along. It seemed like, sometimes there wasn't agreement, or people were really doing their best, but we were all kind of at a loss about what to do about my family member. And around this time, this was taking place in the mid to late 90s. There wasn't as much awareness about mental health as there is now. Still a lot of stigma. My family member actually couldn't access mental health services, couldn't access or afford, mental health services were not widely covered by health insurance back then. So he was dealing with some of these experiences and was using substances to cope with, some of the anxiety and depression that he felt. And then what was going on for me was by the time I reached like high school and college, I was experiencing these periods of creativity, productivity, just very high energy periods where I was kind of like the life of the party. And then I had the low energy periods of, sadness, isolation, self-doubt, things like that. And I struggled with this through college. And toward the end of my college years, I was really stressed, and I felt like I couldn't handle school anymore. And I ended up impulsively dropping out. And it ended up being like the biggest regret of my life. And I could, like, later on, I couldn't really understand why I did it. But when I was in those moments, I was like, I'm just so stressed. I can't handle this anymore. And then I later finished my degree online. And then in 2011, my family member experienced a crisis. And I lived out of state at that time, and there wasn't a whole lot that I could do, but I talked with them on the phone. They had gone to the hospital. They went to the ER after expressing to a friend that they were suicidal. And so they went to the ER, they got help. And when they got there, they were signed up, or during this time, they were signed up for Mass Health. So they were able to access some services. So he got the right diagnosis, the right treatment, entered rehabilitation and entered recovery, and has been in recovery for the last 12 years. And it's just doing amazing, and I was, as a family member, I worried about him for so many years. And I just felt like, I kind of, sometimes people wait for that call, and I kind of expected that call to come. And it was really scary. So I can definitely relate to, a lot of like what people might be dealing with. So he got the correct diagnosis. And when I started reading about this diagnosis, I noticed that there were similarities between my family member and I. So I talked with my provider about it, and we tried a different medication, and that really helped me. I had the correct diagnosis, and I could, deal with it now. And this is when my family member and I we started, taking our recovery very seriously. We went to therapy, took medication. My family member went to recovery meetings, etc. So things were going okay. And then a few years ago, starting in 2018, there were a lot of things happening. I experienced a lot of loss. The big loss was that I lost my mother very suddenly. And I also experienced these other things like within the span of 2 years. And when I talk with people at the hospital, sometimes, they might be dealing with a mental health condition, but also it's kind of, it can be like a string of bad luck in life. And they're just like, when am I going to get a break? And I felt the same way. And I really felt like I just wanted the pain to stop. And I felt suicidal. And I realized that I needed help in late 2020. And these were some things going on for me. I had some suicide warning signs, and risk factors that were happening, especially like death of a family member or a close friend. And I share these in my rap group just to kind of raise awareness. So people know, like, maybe when things are getting bad, these things might be happening. So my protective factors, of course, stuff that was keeping me alive, a lot of it had to do with my family. I didn't want to leave my dad behind. He was super supportive. I had other family members who were very supportive. And I also wanted to honor my mother's life and legacy. And so, these were some things keeping me alive, in addition to, like, I still had a story to tell. I'm a writer. That's really important to me. And then just my overall fighting spirit. So in late 2020, I entered McLean's partial hospitalization program, and it was taking place online at that time due to the nature of the pandemic. And I learned so much from that program. I went to a few group therapy sessions a day, and then I met with a social worker, therapist, and psychiatrist. And I learned so many coping skills and different types of therapies that could help me cope with what I was dealing with. And one thing that was really great too was the social worker, with my agreement, met with my husband to get, a bigger picture of, what was going on with me, and then to support him and just, work with him to be like, okay, what can we do to best help Lisa? And these, are other things that are in my wellness recipe. I kind of call it my recipe because it's like I add things as I go along. I'm like adding different ingredients for the perfect cake or something, right? This isn't stuff that happened all at once, and I keep incorporating new things too. So, so this is part of my wellness recipe. This is what helps keep me well. some other important thing, medication and therapy was on the last slide. That's been really important for me. Acceptance and commitment therapy. I learned about that in the Parsha program. It helped me identify my values and make committed actions to live them. So that was great. And it's also been really helpful to work in a place where I can practice my values. That's been great for my mental health. Educating myself and my supporters about what, my condition or, what's going on with me. So these are all really helpful. So how RAP helps me, I used to get really bent out of shape when life's difficulties happened. And I had more of a, there was more of a risk of, me entering a crisis if things were going wrong. And now that I have a wellness recovery action plan, I feel like I can kind of like bounce back from life's challenges with greater ease. I have a lot more resilience. And if I have an especially difficult time, I can, have a RAP crisis plan that my supporters can act upon. And, life happens, who knows, I could have a crisis in the future. So I'm prepared for it. And I'm also prepared in the ways, beforehand to recognize, okay, here are the signs. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about more today. So I want to do a poll now and get a sense if you've heard about a wellness recovery action plan before. Do you have one already, or have you heard about it? Feel free to fill that out, and we'll get a sense of, if people have heard about it or not. Okay. Yeah.
We'll give folks a chance to put in their final votes, and then we'll close the poll. Okay, and we're closing in 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, so it looks like a lot of people haven't heard about a wellness recovery action plan. And then some of you have heard about it. I don't think anybody's implemented one. So yeah, we're going to talk more about this and share some things. And I'm going to talk about the group that I offer at McLean as well. So thank you for participating. So here's an introduction to the Wellness Recovery Action Plan. Mary Ellen Copeland was a person who experienced mental health conditions. And at one point she was told that she'd never be able to work because of her conditions. And she, eventually decided that she wanted more out of life. And she got together with others to see what worked for their recovery. They kind of worked together to see like what works for most of us, in maintaining our wellness. So they developed RAP, and Mary Ellen Copeland earned a PhD and she became an author. And now RAP books and groups are available worldwide. So it's pretty amazing, like after being told, hey, you'll never be able to work, she's accomplished so much. And that's just one thing that like really gives me hope. Parts of the plan that we cover in the first 8 sessions of my RAP group. And we'll kind of talk about these different parts today. And this thing on the side, crisis plan on the go, that's available on the RAP website. Sometimes like people might put something like that on their refrigerator, or, just something to refer to like in case something happens. So. And a little more about McLean's RAP group. We've been doing this for over a year now. We've done a few sessions. So one goal of the group is to foster connection. And we offer the groups in person for the time being. I actually took my initial RAP group before I did my training, and it was virtual. And due to the nature of RAP and the time, I mean, the sessions are 2 hours each. There was not as much engagement, so we have offered it in person, but may offer more options in the future. So in developing a RAP works best in a group setting where people can share ideas, connect, and support each other. That's one thing that's been great about the RAP groups. People have been so supportive of each other. They, need each other. Sometimes they, trade numbers, like at the end, they want to stay in touch, and they develop new supporters and connections. So that's something that I really enjoy about the groups. And then our booster sessions they're after the initial 8 sessions. They focus on community support, resources, and topics of choice. And those are spread out a little bit, like after the initial 8 sessions. And then afterwards, people can join my drop-in group for continued support. We have a community support and resources group. I had somebody say, gosh, I wish I could come here every week all the time, and that's kind of what led to that, and just people looking for something like this. So the RAP key concepts, these are the 5 pillars of RAP: hope, personal responsibility, education, self-advocacy, and support. And support is something that we really focus on. Sometimes we spend like a whole session on support alone. And I want to point to this image from the Office of the U.S. Surgeon General. They came out with a report recently that discussed the epidemic of loneliness in the United States. And one of the facts that they shared was that lacking social connection is as dangerous as smoking up to 15 cigarettes a day, in regards to odds of premature mortality. So we focus on support a lot. And, if people don't have enough support, like developing more support. Hope, we're in the hope business, just offering hope that there can be a brighter future. Personal responsibility, just taking responsibility for your wellness and health. Education, educating yourself about, your condition. Self-advocacy, for example, like advocating for your rights, and just advocating for the best care possible. And I want to share a note here. So the RAP key concepts, they include personal responsibility and self-advocacy. And due to that, the program emphasizes that the individual, the person with the mental health condition, should create their own plan while they're feeling well. It's really best while they're feeling better. It's not really, it might be a tough time to do it, like if somebody's coming right out of the hospital or if they're just really in it. And I've had some family members ask me, can I develop a RAP plan for my family member? And in order to be true to RAP, you can't, but some people might say, oh, my family member is super supportive. I want them to be involved in developing my RAP, and it's kind of up to them. Or maybe they want to develop their own RAP, maybe parts of their RAP plan are more private and they don't want to really share it. But they'll share like the crisis plan because that's when supporters may have to take over. However, right, each family member can have their own personal RAP. So the person with the mental health condition can have their own, family members can have their own. It's really important to take care of yourself when you're supporting and taking care of a family member. So that can be something, you don't have to have a mental health condition to develop a RAP. And the family can even have a RAP to support the family's overall health. And the RAP site has this family RAP book that talks about that. And that's something that we may offer in the future as a group. So stay tuned for more on that. I'll keep Julie posted on that. So why is this? Why can't a family member develop a RAP plan? So I'll give you like a couple of real life examples. So I have a family member who's awesome, very supportive, love them, has the best intentions. But when it came to me taking medication to address my condition, they were very wary due to some of their own experiences. And they thought that it would be that it would be best that I address my mental health without medication. But, for my personal wellness recovery action plan, medication is crucial for maintaining my wellness. And, that's not the case for everybody. Sometimes people do it through therapy or, they have different options. But for me, that's part of my wellness plan, and my loved one eventually understood this when they saw me doing better. And then another example, I know somebody who thought their loved one should attend AA, to address substance misuse. And they were under the impression that like this is the only route to sobriety, like they need to do this. But the person struggling with substance misuse, they weren't really interested in AA. They had actually gone to a few meetings already. And around this time, this was like in the early 2000s, they felt that the meetings heavily emphasized having a higher power, and it made them uncomfortable as an atheist. So that wasn't the right option for them at that time. But later on, interestingly enough, thing like AA kind of loosens things, where it's like, the higher power can be anything that you want it to be. And this person ended up joining, and it really helped them. And they refer to the group that they met as their higher power. So parts of the plan and examples of what people might include. So the first part of the plan is developing a wellness toolbox. What things help me feel well? What helps me live the way that I want to live? What was I doing when I felt my best? If people like have trouble remembering, like, oh gosh, like I've been feeling badly for so long, I can't remember what it was like to feel well. Maybe like think about 5 years ago when you were really doing well. What was happening then? And then what keeps me on track for my goals? So here are some examples of wellness toolbox items for individuals, and it's different for everybody. And some things that work for me may not work for other people. It's highly individualized. So that's why it's great to, for people to create their own plan. And, and with a group of people who are supportive. So hiking, that's one for me, like, exercising, it's really important. And, noise canceling headphones, that's something that I use. Like I bring them around with me because if I get overwhelmed, like in a crowd or something, I could just throw on my headphones and listen to music. I had a woman in my group say weeding her garden was a wellness tool. She felt like just pulling the weed out of the ground was just that motion was, stress reducing for her. So that was pretty cool. Examples of wellness toolbox items for families. Eating one day a meal together. Families can agree, like, you know what, we're going to have we're going to have one meal a day together, or we'll have a regular family meeting to discuss things. Use I feel statements, undramatically respond to mistakes, reviewing finances together. So I want to pose a question. What's something that you or your family does to maintain wellness? You can share in the chat if you like. Oh, sorry. Go on walks. Walks on the beach. Yes. Exercise. Gardening. Weekly check-ins. Love it. Our son has started taking long bike rides. Board and card games. Family therapy. That's great. Wonderful. Watch a movie together. Play with our dog. Yeah, by the way, that's my dog on the slide. He's my big supporter. And he like, it's funny, he knows when I'm sad. He'll comfort me, and yeah, we go on walks together. So getting a full night's sleep, definitely. Watch old home videos. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Maybe remind yourself of good memories. I love this. Yeah. Yeah, thank you all. It's great. So many great ideas. The next part of the plan is daily maintenance planning. And so this is, thinking about what I need to do every day to stay well. And then what I might need to do every week to stay well. It doesn't have to be daily. What I'm like when I'm well and what I'm like when I'm unwell. So here are some examples, like for me, like meditation, meditation as well. Medication is part of my daily maintenance plan, and then weekly organizing my medication to make sure, like, I have like one of those little things where I can organize it. Some people say like activities of daily living, just showering, doing like the basic things, going to work, preparing for the following day each morning. That's something that I do to help reduce my anxiety. So I'm not like running around like stressed in the morning. And then examples of what people are like when they're well or unwell. People can list this in their plan. I'm social, I'm humorous, I'm going to work, my space is clean, etc. And then what I'm like when I'm unwell: suspicious, anxious, I might be hearing voices or seeing visions, confused, misusing substances, or unkempt. So those are signs that, maybe you're doing unwell. The next part is triggers and stressors and action plans for them. So these things happen, these are things that might make me feel unwell or throw me off track, might cause a reaction. And then I can think about what actions to take and what wellness tools to use to respond, and how I might limit my exposure to triggers or stressors. What are some ways that I can prevent, encountering them? So here are some examples that I've heard about in my groups: loud noises, financial difficulties, people misusing substances if I'm trying to practice sobriety, relationship issues and divorce. These things affect everybody, not just people with mental health conditions. Work difficulties, death of a loved one. These can be big triggers and stressors. So examples for action plans. So I tend to be sensitive to loud noises, so I bring noise canceling headphones with me everywhere. They're always in my purse. It's really helpful just in case. Financial difficulties: somebody might meet with a financial advisor and have regular budget meetings with their family. Traffic, this is me. I need to leave at least a half hour early for the morning commute, or else I'm going to be like, going to have anxiety. Relationship issues, people might attend couples counseling, having too many things to do, saying no to things that are unnecessary at the time. That's something I've had to learn recently myself. I've had to say no to things, and and sometimes people have to say no to things, but they can like get back to them later once they're feeling better or once they're less busy. And then people misusing substances, for example, like some people would avoid, like my family member would avoid situations where this might occur. And work difficulties, maybe like reaching out to your supervisor or a coworker might help. So early warning signs: these are, things that signal that things aren't quite right. People's behavior might change, and they are the signs that somebody needs to act before things get worse. So I use this like storm warning image because it's like a storm is brewing, like things are just not right, like there's something, things are going downhill. So examples of early warning signs for individuals might be suspicious thoughts like I'm going to lose my job without having like any evidence that that might happen. The desire to misuse substances again while trying to maintain sobriety, and feeling emotionally numb, maybe becoming upset easily, becoming tearful, becoming angry, isolating, smoking more than usual. Sometimes that's a sign for people. Falling behind on bills, not going to appointments or forgetting about them, making impulsive decisions. These are some examples of early warning signs. And here are some action plans that people might take. If somebody starts having suspicious thoughts, I've done this, I've talked with a trusted supporter and I get their perspective. I'm like, am I right about this? What do you think? And, sometimes my therapist or like my family member will be like, no, like that doesn't, because sometimes I tend to think very negatively. So, so it's helpful to talk with a supporter. Making impulsive decisions, somebody might try to talk it out with somebody beforehand, especially if it's like a big life decision. Desire to misuse substances again, somebody might attend a recovery meeting and avoid parties or like reach out to their sponsor. That can be helpful. Becoming angry or irritable, maybe the person's stressed, maybe they need to cut out things that are not necessary. Falling behind on bills, like reaching out and scheduling a payment plan, like with, whoever you owe money to. Isolating, forcing yourself to see people, even when you don't feel like it. This is really helpful for me and people who have been to my rap groups, because we've all like, a lot of us have said, I have really felt like I can't go out. I don't want to be around people. I'm too depressed. I don't want people to see me this way. And then I go to this event and I have a great time, like with my friends or my family. So sometimes like people have to like force themselves to do those things, and it can be helpful. Not going to appointments, that might be an early warning sign. So like maybe having a supporter remind you or setting multiple reminders. And I also want to include examples of early warning signs that families might notice. These are ones that I came up with. This is not from the rap book or anything. So somebody in my rap group said, his wife, if she goes into the family car and turns it on and hears loud, aggressive music coming from the speaker, she knows that this is an early warning sign, because that happens when he's struggling. For my family member, when their voice was high pitched, that was a warning sign for my family, because that was, for whatever reason, that usually happened when they had too much to drink. And so that was like a warning sign. Somebody might be slamming doors or like saying unkind things, like really out of character, making impulsive, expensive purchases, drinking more than usual, argumentative, isolating, won't go to family events. They might, sometimes people become tearful over like seemingly small things because they're struggling. He's not checking in each day, she's up most of the night, or they're confused. So I want to check in on this. Is there an early warning sign that you've noticed for your loved one? Please share in the chat. Irritability, not going to family events, right? Staying awake all night. Lack of communication. Not returning calls or texts. I've noticed loud, aggressive music for sure. Yeah, somebody else who notices that. Calling more people than usual. Isolating. Lack of volition or will to do anything. Yeah. Yeah, most of them happening now, somebody said. Yeah. The early warning signs. Gaslighting. bad hygiene and paranoia, being very quiet, like in their own world. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Thank you all for sharing that. And I think people have found with the rap group, they have found the early warning signs some of the most helpful aspects of rap. Um, just like catching those things early. And I know like I have my early warning signs. Some of it is like I feel suspicious or like more anxious than usual. I'm irritable and I'm like, oh gosh, okay, now I recognize something's going on. I need to kick it into high gear to really take care of myself and make sure that I'm not, headed toward a crisis. So the next part is when things are breaking down, and the kind of metaphor I have here is the fire alarm. It's like, all right, here's like, we have to pull the fire alarm. A crisis might happen soon. We need to take action before things become fully engulfed, right? So there may be signs that things are getting much worse and action plans to help prevent a crisis. You'll create action plans to help prevent a crisis. So these are some of my examples that I came up with. And I want to mention too, I was actually talking about early warning signs in my rap group recently. And I mentioned suicidal ideation as an early warning sign. Yeah. And this person said, I feel like that's an example of when things are breaking down. And I'm like, yeah, like it is, this is why it's so individualized. Like, that might be an early warning sign for me, but for somebody else, it's like when things are breaking down. So everybody's plan is, can be so different. So these are some of my examples of when things are breaking down. My family member had a car accident due to operating under the influence. So that's like when things were breaking down for them. Somebody might be losing housing, leaving a domestic violence relationship, which is the most vulnerable time for anybody who experiences that. Voices or visions are very powerful. They might have, be making violent actions or threats, purchasing a weapon, getting fired might be a sign that things are breaking down, giving away possessions, making funeral plans, feeling completely hopeless, like saying stuff like, I have no hope left, getting arrested, etc. So those are some examples on my front of when things are breaking down. And these are some action plans. So, and I want to say, like, at this point, the way that RAP describes it, the individuals are still in control at this point. People still have enough autonomy to make decisions for themselves. It's only when the crisis plan kicks on that they are not able to make decisions for themselves, and the supporters have to step in. So, for me, it was when I was really struggling, I still had enough autonomy to be like, you know what, I'm going to apply to this partial program, and this is what I'm going to do. And then like my family member went to a rehabilitation program. So, so those are some examples, action plans. Leaving a domestic violence relationship, developing a safety plan with a trusted supporter, and speaking with an organization when it's safe to do so. When voices and visions are powerful, contact the treatment team for a medication adjustment. Feeling completely hopeless, seeing your therapist ASAP. I've had weeks where I'm like, do you have any cancellations? I need to talk with you. I've messaged my therapist, or people can call a crisis line like 988. Getting fired, somebody might reach out to their therapist to discuss what happened and the next steps. And then making funeral plans, that might be the point where people are like, you know what, I really need to inquire about care and get some help. crisis planning. So the WRAP crisis plan has 9 different components, and you can see them all here. I won't list them out because we're gonna go through each of them and discuss. So yeah, this is like when things are on fire, that, you know, things are engulfed and things are dangerous at this point. It's very risky. So so this is when the supporters step in to help their loved one when they have like a WRAP crisis plan. So this is best developed when the individual is feeling well. You know, they should be feeling their best when they're developing their crisis plan. Supporters can know what to do if a person enters a crisis, and having a plan can save time and frustration and avoid confusion. And this is so important, just like in healthcare overall. I used to work for a nursing home, and if people didn't really have a plan in place or a healthcare proxy, and sometimes when things happen, there was like a lot of confusion about what do we do, etc. So I feel like it's also really important for you know, for mental health crises, for this to be in place. And this is the part of the plan that people must share with supporters of their choice. So they might describe at the beginning what I'm like when I'm feeling well. All of these things. They can even include a photo of what they look like when they're feeling well. And they can include a photo of what they look like when they're not feeling well, you know, as a reference point. And then signs that the supporters need to take over. There may be signs that indicate to supporters that they need to take over responsibility and make decisions on the individual's behalf. So here are some examples of, you know, when things, you know, when supporters need to take over. You know, somebody has 3 days without sleep, they're not understanding what people say, self-destructive, you know, substance use that makes people concerned about their safety, destroying property, threatening or attempting suicide. And the WRAP program says it might be best to list at least 5 people, including like family members, care providers, friends, etc. And the individual creating the plan should also check with supporters to see if they're comfortable being included, and show supporters their crisis plan. And yeah, that's really important, because, you know, maybe sometimes people might not feel like they are able to help due to various different reasons, which I'll get into that in a couple minutes. So it's important to go to your supporters and be like, hey, you know, I really want you to be my supporter, make healthcare decisions for me. You know, if I'm at risk, you know, would you like to be part of this plan? And they can agree. And these are just some examples of things that people can decide on for their crisis plan. And this is just something I add to, like, assigning a healthcare proxy or creating an advanced directive. I don't know where people are located. In Massachusetts, Massachusetts doesn't allow for a psychiatric advance directive. Other states do. What Massachusetts does is that they allow for like a healthcare proxy, and this also applies to like general health. Like I, you know, signed this for my my parents to be like their healthcare proxy if they couldn't make medical decisions for themselves. So the individual has to pick somebody that they really trust to be their supporter and to be their healthcare proxy. So this can be signed, notarized, and brought to a lawyer. And this is like some information just from the Massachusetts website. So check your state's website if you're interested in learning more. So we talk about who's involved and who's not involved. You know, individuals might have a list of people they don't want to be involved with their decision making or their care, and they might describe why as well. In this section, it can also include a plan for how to settle disputes if they arise. So few real life examples. family member who believes that mental health issues are all the individual's fault and loves to gossip, can't be involved if I'm experiencing a crisis. Yeah, like that's going to be uncomfortable. So that's like one situation that happened in my real life. One of my loved ones can't be involved in the beginning of my crisis because it might be too overwhelming for them. They maybe they like have anxiety, but they can be involved later on by helping me like find resources or inquiring about programs. That can be something that they can do. And then a loved one who just doesn't have the time, like if they have small children and are working toward their PhD. And I know that sounds like two separate examples, but my sister-in-law actually did that. So she's a great supporter. She's lovely. And but she's very busy. So like I have to be realistic about who's on my crisis plan. And then something else that people can do is creating a medical ID on their phone that can be accessed by supporters and first responders. So I think different phones have this. I have an iPhone, so I know how it works there, but you can look up the information about it and it can have this information. And I'll show you an example of mine. This is on my phone. I include my information, my medications, my allergies, who my providers are. Please take me to such and such ER. Please do not take me to such and such for psychiatric reasons, etc. So this can be accessed by, say if I'm not with my family or I'm alone or whatever, this can be accessed by first responders because they can access it even if you have a lock screen on. So it's good to have just in general, so you might list medications. This next part, you might list medications that help and don't help on your WRAP crisis plan. I might put on my plan that that one medication I tried, it gave me akathisia, and I know that it does that for me. Sometimes like if people go to the hospital, they're with like a new treatment team and maybe they don't know that like I already tried such and such medication. So it's good to know like, hey, I'm really not interested in trying this again because it had bad side effects for me. And the next part involves treatments. People might list treatments that they prefer or treatments they'd rather avoid. Can also include alternative therapies. So those are examples of some of those treatments that people might list. And if hospitalization isn't the best option for somebody, maybe somebody has trauma related to hospitalization, or it's just, or maybe they just don't really have access. They live in a rural area, so they might try to recover at home or in the community somehow. So finding out like what resources are available in the community. There are also these respite centers that they're not very common now, but they're becoming more of a thing, and they're peer run. And so people can go there. It's sort of like a non-clinical place to like kind of recover and, have some respite. The only thing about them is like if they're peer run, they don't, the medication can't be adjusted, things like that. So yeah, so just finding out what's in your area. Are there resources in your community that could help during a crisis? Can share, can share that in the chat if you like. Hotlines. Yeah. And I think for me, the partial program, like I feel like if I were at risk again, I would definitely use the partial program. The living room. Family support groups. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Yes, we have resources, but they are inconsistent about how they react when someone is in crisis. Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's challenging. Okay. All right, I'm gonna skip ahead. And then somebody might list acceptable and unacceptable treatment facilities. They're like, I really prefer to go to this one. And it's never a guarantee that they're gonna, if they have this in their RAP plan, that they're going to be sent to the facility that they want. But it's something that they can keep in mind, or they can be like, you know what, I'm going to go to this ER and get help from there. And then they might say like which treatment facilities they might avoid and why. And then help from others, people can list specific things that others can do that would help. And these are some things, something like when my family member was in the hospital, he was like, I'm bored, I don't know what to do. So we brought him like books and puzzles, and then like maybe having somebody visiting me at the hospital to make me laugh, or would be really helpful. And then people might list things that aren't helpful. Something that hasn't been helpful for me in the past is when family members have peppered me with like several questions at once when I'm already really anxious and overwhelmed. And so, I'd include that in my plan, that I would really prefer that not be the case. And sometimes like, yeah, people say things like, oh, you need to read the Bible more to address your mental health. And it's like, that might not be helpful in the moment. That can be a good coping skill for people, like spirituality and things like that. But in a crisis, that might not be the right time. And then people can indicate when supporters no longer need to use the plan. And these are some signs that I'm doing better. I've returned to work, I'm sleeping well, I'm not having suicidal thoughts, etc. So the supporters no longer need to use the plan. So the person is back in control and has autonomy again. Completing the crisis plan, this can be updated, whenever there's new information or supporters change. People can provide their supporters with copies. It would be best to date it, just to be like, okay, this is the crisis plan as of October 12th, 2023. Everybody knows that that's the latest version. People can sign a healthcare proxy. And the individual who created their crisis plan is encouraged to celebrate, because creating a crisis plan can take a lot of energy, and it's really a big deal. So and then post-crisis planning, the time like when somebody might be leaving the hospital, or like when they're after their crisis. I like to think about leaving the hospital, like if you've had like a mental health issue, should be the same as when somebody has a physical health issue. When people they need time to recover and to recuperate, depending on the person, but sometimes people don't go back to work right away. They're still dealing with issues. So it can be a challenging time. So these are some questions that somebody might consider, what big one that I've heard in my rep groups: when am I going to resume working in childcare responsibilities? Sometimes people go back to work part-time, and then they eventually go back full-time. What did I learn from this crisis? And what life changes do I want to make because of what I learned? And something that I learned as a result of my own crisis, I was like, I need to make life changes. I need to get a different job. I need to be, practicing my values and living my values. And that has really helped my mental health. So these are like some post-crisis goals, like once people are feeling better, things that they can work on: going back to work or school, getting a different job, focusing on sobriety, addressing relationship issues, etc. Developing more self-compassion. We talk about that a lot in my groups. That's a big one. And I just want to share this quote from Batman: The Dark Knight Rises. It's the character Alfred. He is he becomes a father figure to Bruce Wayne after Bruce's parents die. And so Alfred says, "Why do we fall, sir? So that we can learn to pick ourselves up." And Bruce says, "You still haven't given up on me." And Alfred says, "Never." And I always get emotional reading that and just thinking about that, because I just think of how my family has never given up on me. And it's amazing. I'm so glad. And I really thank you for not giving up on your family member and for supporting them in such an awesome way. So to wrap up, RAP can be helpful and empowering to individuals to boost and maintain wellness. It's best to work on RAP in a group setting, where people, and this is like just kind of an overview of RAP. Like I said, like the sessions are 2 hours each, and we really, take deep dives into each topic. RAP is specific to the individual's needs. Action plans can help prevent a crisis. It's really important. RAP can help families and supporters know what to do during a crisis. The RAP group at McLean Hospital happens quarterly. People can email me if individuals are interested in signing up. They can email me or call me. And then after RAP, we have a community support and resources group. We're starting this up, and it's just, I actually had one person in RAP say, she's like, "Oh gosh, like, the 10 weeks are over. I wish that I could still come to this every week." And so now we're trying to offer something like that, where people can come and check in and get additional support. So I just want to thank you. And yeah, let me know, email me or call me if you have any questions about this. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. I feel like I've learned a lot about RAP, and I hope that everyone else has as well. And before we get to Q&A, I have one question to pose to the audience as well about thinking for a moment on what is your favorite part about RAP. So feel free to put this in the chat if there was a certain element of what Lisa had talked about that stuck out to you, or one thing that you feel it could be helpful for your relative. Definitely feel free to put that in so we can kind of reflect together. And as folks are thinking, at least for myself, one thing that I really liked about what you said, Lisa, was helping us all take stock of maybe what are signs that things are going well too, not just to focus on, what's not going well so much, but signs that we can recognize in ourselves or our loved ones about, okay, this actually shows that things are happening, or things are maybe progressing. And just as important are those early warning signs too. Somebody else shared kind of the whole discussion around crisis planning. Another person also said, the best part is that the individual gets to make the plan, right? Very empowering, as you had mentioned. And somebody else mentioned having an action plan for possible future crises. We hope that none of you have to deal with any crises, in the future. And also it can feel good to have some preparation, so you have a little bit of confidence about how to respond to sometimes what is often unknown and sometimes unexpected for folks. All right. So we have a question. So we're going to move into our Q&A. And so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And it looks like we have a question from someone who raised their hand in the audience. So feel free to unmute yourself if you like to ask the question, or you can put that in the chat.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's okay.
The question is, how can we have an action plan if our loved one with schizophrenia has anosognosia, no awareness or hardly any awareness of their situation, mental health?
Great, thank you for asking that question.
Yeah, and that's where they're not as aware of, yeah. Yeah, that's really difficult. And I think in that situation, maybe kind of like the early warning signs that we talked about that family members might notice, maybe family members notice like, okay, these things are going on. And coming from a place of, I'm concerned, and what can we do? What can we do to help? And how can we support you? But I know that can be a challenging situation. I know I've had family members who have sort of lacked some insight about how bad things were, and it was really difficult. And I think they eventually learned, how bad things were as things went along. But trying to convince people in the moment can be challenging at times. Yeah.
And I wonder, Lisa, because I think that there are probably others who might be in a similar situation at times. How appropriate might it be to potentially talk about maybe different elements or options of what might traditionally come up in a RAP plan, and think about, kind of floating some ideas like, hey, I'm recently have been noticing X, Y, or Z. What do you think? Just to kind of see if what your perception is as a family member might line up with what somebody else thinks, or think about, hey, next time, we do run into this type of situation, what would be helpful? Like, here are a couple of options. What would be most helpful for you to kind of guide some of those discussions versus coming up with a whole RAP plan and prescribing that per se? What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, it may be difficult to sort of like present the plan in that moment, but just
Right.
having like something. And it's really interesting because sometimes family members have different opinions of like, okay, this is really bad, or this isn't bad, or, whatever. And so it's just, I know like when one particular family member was struggling, I gave them, some resources. I was like, here are some resources that you can take advantage of if you want. And, kind of offering that option. And, I've heard about this place, I've heard great things about them. They offer great care and, things like that. And, so just like kind of lovingly like offering things, but not like being too pushy about it. Sometimes if like, like I've struggled with this too, like, cause if you like are too pushy, like people like push back sometimes.
100%.
Yeah. So yeah, just kind of having like a soft approach, I think can be helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And I think what you're also getting at, so that we don't feel like we're pushing, also speaks to one of the things that we talked about in our first webinar on communication, where if we go into a conversation that we're not sure our loved one wants to have, we can ask permission first. Like, hey, is it okay if we talk about this? Or would you like any ideas or suggestions? And if someone gives you the green light to kind of go ahead with that, then that might be a sign that they're up for having this collaborative conversation rather than feeling like you're talking at them. So that's
Yeah.
one thing that we can keep in mind. So one question that's coming up in the Q&A is, what if we're in a situation where you notice early warning signs with a loved one, like really loud or aggressive music per se, but the loved one might lack some insight into what's going on with their mental health right now. And so what might be the best way to support them? Just everyone listening to the loud music, aggressive music per se, or perhaps, maybe the next day, talk to him about his choice of music, or ask him about it a little bit, like with the soft approach. What might you recommend, Lisa?
I think like it's always if the loud music isn't bothering anybody, or like really like getting this person in like a higher energy state that might be dangerous, like like sometimes, yeah, I listen to loud rock music, like, and sometimes it's a way to like, like get some emotions out or just, uh, but if like maybe paying attention to their behavior, if it's like, okay, it's affecting their behavior in a certain way, where it's like, oh, I noticed that, you seem like more irritable you know, or it seems like you're talking really fast and I'm having trouble following you. And, you know, maybe bringing that up, just how it affects the behavior, maybe rather than the music itself, because it's like, because then they might be like, well, I'm just listening to music, what's the problem, or whatever.
Yeah,
So,
I
or
like
like,
how.
I notice when you listen to this music you tend to get angry or something. Yeah.
So what else about listening to the music might be somewhat concerning or impacting the behavior or functioning? Yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
And so one of the questions that I was thinking about in talking or listening rather to your presentation was, you know, for yourself, having developed the RAD plan, certainly used it a lot, teaching people other about it. How is life different now, with a RAP plan versus maybe earlier on before you had ever heard of RAP, or before you ever developed a plan for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm able to catch stuff really early. There have been points where I've been kind of like close to crisis or like experiencing those early warning signs. And
Uh-huh.
I think in the past, like that might have led to me, like, maybe calling out of work for a week or, just like leading to like maybe substance misuse or,
Hmm.
different behaviors and stuff. And
Hmm.
now I'm like, okay, like this thing is happening. And, I'm feeling like kind of angry. I'm feeling kind of suspicious. And, I
Mm.
noticed these signs. So then I'm like, all right, sometimes like I've taken a day off from work or like worked from home or like,
Sure.
taking a break from like doing facilitating groups or something like that.
Mm. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And just like really focused on myself and doing self-care so I could like, really help support others in the best way. Yeah.
That sounds really helpful. And I'm glad that it's been such a positive change for you too. Uh, I think that's super encouraging for lots of us who might be considering this. And so for yourself, how did you first hear about RAP in terms of the beginning of this journey and what got you interested in learning more?
Yeah. Yeah. My supervisor, Nancy, brought it up. I had never heard of it and I was intrigued. She was like, would you want to check out this book and see what you think?
Mm-hmm.
And I was intrigued because it was developed by somebody with lived experience, actually several people with lived
Yeah.
experience.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
That definitely makes a difference. And for you, when you think about, let's say, a person comes up with their own RAP plan, what do you feel like might be a helpful way to communicate that to different family members, or even other healthcare providers who may not realize there is a RAP plan in place?
yeah. Yeah, I have this workbook and I actually give this out during my groups, the RAP
Oh,
workbook
uh-huh.
that people can fill out the different in a crisis.
Mm.
Well, you probably can't read it, but but there are several, like the whole plan is here, so people can keep that on hand. They can
Okay.
keep, like an electronic version, if they like. And then like in regards to providers, the thing about RAP is it's really important for families to advocate, like if
Mm.
somebody has a RAP too, because
Mhm.
if the treatment team, um, they don't necessarily have to legally follow whatever is in somebody's rap. So
Sure.
that's important to remember.
Mhm.
But it's just like, okay, we know that this works for my family member, here's her plan. And I feel like the team, especially at McLean, would be like, yeah, this is really good to know. This is good information. So
Mhm. And thank you for sharing that, because especially there might be times when someone might be receiving care and may or may not be able to share that information themselves, perhaps. So how might you recommend families advocate? Like, what does that look like in a situation like that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think like as long as the family member agrees, like having family talk to the treatment team,
Mm,
and sometimes that provides more insight. And like I said, like when I was like when the social worker at the partial program spoke with my husband, she got a bigger picture about what was going on and
mm, mhm,
the years of loss that I experienced and how much that impacted me.
mm,
Um, so so yeah, and like at McLean, like there are like, you know, family meetings, you know, as long as
sure.
the individual agrees. So yeah.
Right, definitely. And even, I hope this isn't always the situation, but sometimes it is the case that clinicians may not be able to share information with family members. But if a family member is aware of a loved one's RAP plan, they do always have the right to contact a clinician and share one-way information to that clinician, who would then have the right to share that information with their client, but at least they can be aware of if a RAP plan exists, for instance. Someone else put in the chat, if a loved one doesn't have self-awareness, perhaps, of having a mental health condition, do they have awareness of warning signs? This might be a very individualized kind of answer
Oh,
depending on the situation or the individual, but what are your thoughts on that, Lisa?
yeah. Because I think back when I didn't recognize early warning signs. My
Mhm.
family members certainly didn't. We didn't have awareness. We didn't even know what was really going on with us until we learned more about our condition.
Sure.
So it's I think it's something that people learn as they go along, and
Mm.
you know, sometimes you know, a really good resource too. There's a video um, of a doctor for giving a talk to Nami Marin County, and he talks about working with lack of insight.
Mm. Mhm.
There's a video about that on YouTube,
Okay.
and I found that interesting because I do, you know, I used to deal with that, and also like I've run into people like I work with here who have
Sure.
dealt with it as well. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that kind of brings me to my next question. For what types of mental health experiences is RAP appropriate?
What type of mental health experiences is RAP appropriate? Oh yeah, I have a lot of people ask me like, oh, what conditions, like, do they have to have a certain
Sure.
condition to join the group? Um, and they don't. Like it can be
Right.
any mental health condition to join my group.
Excellent.
Yeah, and people, like I said, there are also people who develop RAP plans for like dealing with diabetes or like, you know, their
Hmm.
chronic health issues, or like
That's great
it
to
can
know.
really, yeah, it can apply to anything.
Okay. Thank you so much. And oftentimes we might have loved ones who have overlapping medical and psychiatric conditions as well. All
Mhm.
right, so we are almost at the end of time. So thank you so much for your time, Lisa. I'm going to just close out with next heads up for what's coming down the road for us with our next webinar presentation next month. So for those of you who are interested in rounding out this year's webinar series with us, next month we have our Family Recovery Night, sharing stories of hope. And we also have McLean resources. If you are not familiar with these already, we have a number of family support groups that are open to folks on Zoom right now. And if you are interested in any of these, some of them might be specific to people who are getting services at McLean, but you're welcome to email the facilitators if you are interested in learning more. And again, Lisa's information is here about the RAP groups that she leads. And then we also have recovery nights that may not necessarily include family members as well as panelists led by Steve Fideli. And so I would just like to acknowledge all of our wonderful collaborators and support through our division at McLean, and for the research that led to this as well. And for any of you who have any questions, definitely feel free to get in touch with me. My email and phone number are here. And then if you haven't already done so, please feel free to complete the feedback survey so that we can continue making these webinars as useful as possible as we think ahead to next year and what we might be able to offer going forward. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the night. And Lisa, thank you so much again for sharing more about RAP with us.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you, everybody. Take
Right.
care.
Good night.